Okay, so I'm going to talk about uh, the code of ethics tying into this form I found of it's a consent form from West Texas Counseling and Guidance, which is a mental health service, and I'm going to tie it in kind of with an article I found about readability of informed consent. I think it's so important to know what you're reading, and I think it's important for your clients to know what they're reading, what they're getting into. That way, later down the road, they're not agreeing with you, but you say, "Well, you signed it, so I don't know what to tell you." So, the first thing this talks about is number and lengths of session. I really think that this company in this area definitely puts their client first. It talks about everyone needing different sessions, and it depends on many factors and different people. So I think that's great that they talk about that. Uh, they also talk about relationships between the therapist and the clients, which is talked about in the code of ethics. You're not supposed to have sexual relationships with your clients. You really want to just keep it therapist and client, or counselor and client, um, rather than mixing in personal and business relationships, because I think that really affects your therapeutic relationship with your client or your counselor. Um, it talks about goals, purpose, and techniques. I think they could go a little bit more into goals here. It's a very short subject area, and I think as a client, I really want to know your goals, because if your goals don't match my goals, then I don't want to even go through this. Then it goes on to talk about confidentiality, and this is talked about in the code of ethics. You're not supposed to go around everywhere in town saying, "Hey, George told me about his personal problem today." No, you have to keep that to yourself. And this area talks about no information being released without client's written consent, unless there's exceptions like child abuse or elderly abuse. And then, you know, they really, like I said, they really talk about that in the code of ethics. You have to have confidentiality. You're not being ethical if you're telling everyone about your client's problems. It does talk about a risk of therapy. It talks a lot about change. And then it talks about payment for services, which I think is good, because I want to know how much I'm paying up front, because if I can't afford it, or my insurance can't afford it, unfortunately, I got to go find somewhere else. Or maybe I can work with you on a payment plan. Talks about after-hour emergencies, which I think is great. That way they know you're there 24/7 for you. You're really putting your client first again. It talks about therapist death, which in the Code of Ethic, it talks about what happens if someone is in capacity or death in that process. So I think it's great they covered that. Again, they have a subject area about consent to treatment. So you have to sign, and you are not forced to do any kind of treatment. That is your own personal choice. And then they give contact information. They talk about privacy practices. So they talk about having a legal responsibility under the law of the United States and the states of Texas, which I think is fabulous. So it talks about, again, being confidential, but also, hey, if the law changes, it might change our practice. And it does talk about how the clients will be informed, and I think that's great, because that's something they need to be informed of, because if you change something and don't tell them, that can make a lot of things go wrong. So that is the majority of the consent form. For the most part, I think this one was it was very understandable, and I tried to even think of people who may have a disability, or maybe a minor, which hopefully the parents should be there, and read it through it with them, and hopefully be able to explain it to them. For the most part, though, I think it is really readable. So I would give this one a good score. But I did see some other ones that I was very confused, so I think the clients would also be very confused. Thank you.